Growing up, we never talked about sex, and feminine health was also taboo. Most of what I learned was through a textbook in school. Until I was 21, a senior in college, and boom, during my first gynecological exam, they discovered cancer on my cervix caused by HPV, which had gone undetected. I was terrified. Cancer, that's a heavy word. In that moment, I remember feeling incredibly alone. This experience made me realize the importance of caring for my intimate health. I became super aware of the products that I was using. I wanted products that made me feel sexy, that I could trust. I wanted a brand that I could turn to. I wanted more. So I created Ketish, something that women like me always needed.
Hi guys, and welcome back to A Millennial Mind. Today I'm so excited to introduce you to Emaan Abbas, the founder of Ketish. So hi Emaan, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for having me here.
I am honored to have you on the podcast. I've heard so much about your brand. I feel like it's been featured in Vogue and Cosmo and everyone's talking about it, and I'm just so honored to have you on the podcast so early on as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 6 weeks, so we're still fresh, very fresh. I still feel like I'm in that pinch myself mode, but yeah, it's quite early on, but I'm so grateful for how much exposure we've had, and yeah, sky's the limit, I guess, right?
Exactly. But before we talk about Ketish and tell everyone what an amazing brand you've built, just give us a bit of an intro about you and growing up and your life before Ketish, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the States. My parents immigrated to California back in the early 80s. We're two young immigrants that worked hard to provide a better life for my sister and I. They moved to a small country town, like a random country town south of the San Francisco Bay Area. And although the Bay Area is super diverse, where we grew up in Hollister, California, it was not very diverse growing up. We were one of the only the only Egyptian family in town, one of the only Middle Eastern families, Muslim families, growing up in Hollister. And so it was, I did always feel like I was a little different. My family or my parents, they were quite strict. And I think growing up, I constantly battled that, just trying to, trying to feel like, okay, I'm a normal American girl, but I have to conform to these strict cultural rules and just conform to my parents and how they wanted to raise us. And I really did battle this growing up. And the older I got, the more I realized, like, man, my parents were just trying to hold on to the only culture that they knew. And I tried to rebel and battle against that every chance I got.
Sound like me. I feel like it's really hard, I think, when you come from a different culture or a different background and then you move to a different country, because you're almost in the middle, right? So same with me. I was the first generation that was born here. My parents are Indian, but they grew up in Africa. And back then there was a lot of differences in between the way their parents raised them and the way they're raising us. And I think they're also in conflict, right? As to what to do, what's right, what's not right. Because, we always hear this term, I don't know if you hear it as well, it's like you're losing your culture. You're becoming more American or more English or whatever. And I feel that's really hard for them to almost adjust to as well, right?
Right. Yeah, I feel like I feel so bad. Now that I'm older and I talk to my parents about it, I definitely realize that these rules that were put in place were meant to protect us. And there were so many unknowns. Like growing up in Egypt, they didn't have prom. They didn't date. Like, what's a boyfriend when you're 16? It's like it was unheard of. And back then it was like, oh, my life is over. You're not letting me go to prom, or you're not letting me have a boyfriend. And it's like, yeah, of course they weren't. They wanted to protect us. And I get that now, but back then it was like awful.
I can imagine. So you were living in San Fran. How did you make the shift to Dubai?
Yeah, so I started my beauty career with
Mm-hmm.
Sephora. So I was living in the Bay Area, working for Sephora. I was an operations manager, and I'd always been super passionate about beauty. And to finally land a job at one of the biggest beauty players in the industry, it's like, okay, this is amazing. This is my dream. Um, but I definitely wanted more. I mean, the role that I was in was more operations
Right.
based. I had a passion for brands and for products,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wanted to get closer to it. And um, I was planning a trip to Dubai to visit my
Right.
sister, and I had always been a huge fan of this woman, Huda
Yeah.
Katan, who had this little tiny brand at the time, Huda Beauty, and I'd always been a follower and a huge fan. And she actually had just launched in Sephora in the
Right.
U.S. And I felt like I was like the ambassador to Huda Beauty, but within the
Support space.
Sephora,
Yeah.
the Sephora company. And I was preparing for this trip, and I had asked one of my coworkers, would it be possible to go visit the Huda Beauty offices when I traveled to
Mhm.
Dubai? And little did I know that the team was
Right.
tiny at the time. And my coworker ended up calling Huda and said, there's this girl. She's coming to Dubai. She works for Sephora. She would love to meet you and like visit the office. Is that
Yeah.
okay? And I don't know why she said yes, but she did. Thank God.
Crazy.
And I know it was crazy. And now I realize, I mean, her time was so precious. The fact that she spent like an hour to 2 hours with
Mm-hmm.
me is like, I guess I didn't understand the magnitude, but yeah, I left that meeting just feeling like, wow, she is incredible. She is
Mm-hmm.
everything that I felt she was. And I just want a piece of that magic, a piece of this world that she's building. So I ended up a few months later asking her for a
Oh
job,
my God.
and she brought me to Dubai to work on her team as a product development manager. And that's essentially how I ended up here.
That is so crazy. So you just asked someone if you can go visit her offices just to speak to her, right? Or was there a kind of interest of you moving there or having a job with her?
I feel like the connection with Huda started long before I even started working for
Mm-hmm.
Sephora. She was, one of the first influencers, Middle Eastern influencers of our
Yeah.
time. I felt like I saw a really big piece of me in
Mm-hmm.
her. I admired her. She spoke my language. She was, born and raised in the
Yeah.
States, Middle Eastern background. And so I felt a really big connection to her. And I don't know, I really don't know what made me so fearless to ask these questions, but I did, and they worked.
I love that. I think it's
So.
amazing. I think for people who are listening to this or watching this, they're going to be thinking, there's something in my life I want to do, but I'm too scared. I mean, I feel this all the time with my business. Like, I'm so scared. Or even with my podcast, I was so scared to message you. I was like, there's no way you're going to do the
Aw.
podcast with me. You're on the cover of Cosmo with Huda and Mona. But, like,
Oh.
I listened to one of your other talks and you said, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Right? And I love that. I think that's so powerful, so true to any entrepreneur or anyone in any business, right? Even at work, if you're working in a company and you don't ask for something, you're never going to get it, right? So having that
Right.
fearless, I guess, determination is really paid off for you, right? Which is why I think it's so powerful that you still stick to that mantra too. So tell me about like how
Yeah.
you were working with Huda and how you transitioned, because one of the things I coach people on is transitioning from being an employee to being a founder and a CEO. It's very different, right? Being an employee to an employer is a big jump. But how
Right.
was your journey with that?
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, obviously I started this brand in Huda, and the family decided to incubate and invest in it. And uh, I remember back in 2017, she had launched a video on her
Hmm.
social, just calling people to the table, saying, I'm starting this fund. I want to invest in passionate, hungry entrepreneurs that have mission-based brands, because I didn't have an experience of people wanting to back me and support my business when I first started. So I want to pay it forward. And I remember when she posted that, it really got me thinking. And I'd always had a dream of launching my own brand or doing something that I, was for myself and out of my own passions. And when I saw that video, it really was the first time I actually put pen to paper and started working on Ketish. And when I originally pitched the idea, I was really nervous because I was an employee of hers. So I got to work with her side by side, developing products. I got to really see how she took a vision of something, an idea, an inspiration, and how she translated that into physical products and products that people fell in love with. And I think that's what really gave me that push. It's like, okay, if HUDA could do it, and if I believe in something so much, like the way that I believe in the mission of Ketish and the products behind Ketish, then maybe I could do it too. But I think that taking that initial leap and pitching to her, it was really scary. One, because I admire her so much, and I respect her so much. I respect her opinion. And so that first pitch or the first meeting, I walked in with the mindset like, okay, this could go one of three ways. Either she's going to love it and say, okay, let's do this, or she's going to say, what are you doing? Like, that's cute, get back to work. Or she could say like, okay, great idea, but maybe not. Or I like where your mind is going, but maybe not. And that first meeting, actually, she wasn't 100% sold on it, and she liked it, and she liked where my mind was going, but she was a little unsure. And I think it's because, the feminine wellness category was it was just emerging at that time. But it took some more time, and it took a couple more meetings, and it took bringing Mona to the table and speaking to her about it. And then I think they really saw the passion, they saw the vision, they saw, how powerful a brand like this could be. And I think that's what really made them buy into it. And 2.5 years later, here we are, and it's been incredible to have this relationship transform from total fangirl
crazy
to influencer to employee to employer to now mentee, mentor, business partner. It's been incredible.
It's interesting you say that, because there's two things that you said that really stand out to me, because I'm trying to relate. Okay, if I was going to take an idea to someone that I am a fangirl of, that I am working for now, which is like a dream, and they weren't like 100% I believe in you, like this is amazing, I think I would be so scared to go back and be like, okay, can you look at it again? Or generally, I think when people have an idea and it's so close to them, because generally when you think of an idea, it's something you're really passionate about, it's something that is close to your heart, right? For you to go to HUDA with that idea, for her to be unsure, and for you to keep persevering, how did you do that?
Honestly, I don't know. No, I know. I mean, I think when it comes to this brand, obviously I've had such a rough journey when it comes to my feminine wellness, and I felt so strongly and so passionate about the power of this brand and how needed it is, and it was at the time of pitching, that I wasn't going to let anyone tell me no, even if it was someone that I admire and that I respect so much. I think what was great about the conversations that I had with HUDA is that she never said absolutely not. She always said, okay, I like that, but go deeper, go harder, think about it from every angle. Think about it from the perspective of someone who doesn't have a deep passion for this category, or doesn't have the same journey as you. Like, how can you make it make sense to them? And how can you make it something that like they're gonna fall in love with and want to back you with money, in action? And so she always challenged me, and I was up for the challenge and up to rethinking and perfecting and really digging into like, what is my purpose and why do I want to do this? And yeah, it just kind of kept me coming back for more.
That's so powerful. I even think people who are listening to this are going to be either thinking about starting an idea or maybe they've started it already. And those kind of key questions are so important when you're starting a business. It's not just to look at it from your perspective, right? But who's your ideal customer? Like, what do they want? And what's going to convince the ones that don't want your product to want to have your product? But you talk about just now you've had a really rough journey with, female wellness. And I just want to talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Sure. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I grew up in a pretty strict Muslim home where the topics of, I think so many different cultures can relate to this, but specifically with my experience coming from a Middle Eastern background, a Muslim background, in our home we never really talked about sex or intimate health, feminine health. It was quite taboo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at a pretty young age. I was 21. It was my first time living away from home, and I decided to go see the gynecologist for the first time. And it was during that first visit they detected cancer on my cervix, which was caused by HPV, and which, to those of you who don't know, it's a sexually transmitted virus. And in that moment, or when that happened, I felt terrified. And I think hearing the word cancer is terrifying on its own, but also realizing that, wow, I don't think I can turn to my parents with this. I don't think I could turn to my family for support on this, because how could I share with them, some of the things that I was choosing to do with my lifestyle. And it made me really fearful that they would potentially make it more about, what I was choosing to do, so the act of having sex versus, what was actually going on with my body. And so I decided to take that journey on my own, and I was really young, and luckily they were able to detect it really early, to where I did not have to go through chemo, and we were able to treat it with cryosurgery. So thank God for that. But it really turned me on to my intimate health and my reproductive health, and what I was choosing to put on my body in terms of products. And I just remember at the time there were a lot of products that existed in the feminine care space where you were a little unsure, like, is this okay for my body? Is this healthy? Is this safe? Will it cause more harm if I use this? And I think that's what really kind of opened my eyes up to that feminine care space. But I also think the experience of not really having, adequate education or feeling empowered, like I could go to a gynecologist without the fear of disappointing my family or fear of disappointing my community, maybe my situation would have turned out differently.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's what's really driven me to create a brand like Ketish.
First of all, I'm really sorry you had to go through that experience. But secondly, I think you're so brave. And I feel like I answered my own question in the beginning. Like, how did you persevere? Like, this story is insane, and it's so clear you have such a core value and passion towards this product. I think a lot of Indian girls, so I'm Indian, I'm from South Asian heritage. I feel like a lot of girls would be facing the same thing. I don't think I've ever been to a gynecologist. And it's so funny because I was telling my mum today, I was like, I have my podcast today, I'm recording with this girl called Emaan, and I was telling her about you, and she was like, oh my God, are you going to talk about that? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, and I was like, why? What's wrong with it? And now I feel like my parents are a little bit more open to a lot of the things that I talk about, because I've kind of showed them how it is helping people, and it helps me, and it also helps to learn a different perspective and learn about new things. But there is still such a taboo around it. I think especially in Asian, Middle Eastern cultures, people don't talk around sexual health, intimate health, nothing. Female wellness is just not a topic of discussion. And I really think male allies are the way forward here as well. So we need to not only teach our daughters and sisters, but also our brothers and our sons and our friends, right? Because, how many times do you whisper, I'm on my period, or I need to go out and get cat tampons? It's like not a common thing. that men are actually like, oh,
Right.
cool, do you need anything from the supermarket? Should I grab you some tampons? And it's a very natural thing, and we really need to start normalizing it. And I think what you're doing with Ketish, and I'm just so excited to see what new products you have coming in place, but what you're doing at the moment with that is normalizing it. You're talking about it. You're making sure you speak to women. You're making sure you're bringing this conversation up and about rather than hiding it away.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest regret is not telling my parents
Mm.
sooner. I mean, to be honest, I just told them. I
Really?
just told them about my journey and the things that I've been through.
Oh God.
Largely because I was launching this brand and I wanted, if I was going to tell the world
Right.
and open myself up to the world, I had to be able to share with my family. And it was
Totally.
terrifying.
So you went through that thing the whole all by yourself. They had no idea. Oh
Yeah,
my
they
gosh.
didn't they didn't know at
Wow,
all.
you are so
And
brave.
I feel it makes me really sad, and I know it makes my parents really sad. I think my mom struggles with it the most. I think she feels like she failed me because my parents are amazing. They're so
Yeah.
supportive, they're so loving, and the fact that I didn't open this part of my experience with them, I think it really has hurt them. Um, but the beautiful silver lining around this is I don't know if I would have if I would not have gone through the journey the way that I did, I don't know if it would have led me to this
Of
point.
course.
But I also am so appreciative of how it strengthened my relationship with my parents. And we are now very open and can talk about everything under the sun. And if we could provide some inspiration, I know not every family is the same, but if we could be an example of how, being open and talking about the tough stuff could strengthen your bond and strengthen your family, then I can tick
Yeah.
that off as like a job done.
I love that. I mean, I talk about confrontation all the time. I feel, especially in Asian, Middle Eastern, South Asian cultures, girls aren't meant to speak up, right? We're meant to be timid, we're meant to be submissive, we're not meant to really speak our minds. And when we do, it's like, oh God, she's the difficult one, or, she's the loud one. And I've always been labeled that as well. And I feel from doing my podcast and my parents really seeing me having meaningful, powerful conversations, they're more open with me now and I'm more open with them. And I think it's really about, like you said, each family is so different. So it's all about working in a way that you feel is going to be best for you and what's comfortable for you as well. So, I'm very much a
Right.
believer of like wear your heart on your sleeve. And the problem with me is I just always say how I'm feeling. But the reason why I do is I think it's so much worse if you don't say how you're feeling, you shy away from the problem, that relationship breaks because then it's impossible to repair it, right?
Right.
Because it's years and years and years of words left unsaid or resentment. And then when you're like, I don't know, 60, 70 years old and you want to go back and repair it, it's so much harder because you've got all this blockage of all these things that you've been reminded of that this person's done to you or upset you, right?
Right.
So I think it's so powerful to start to have difficult conversations, start to be confrontational in a good way. Confrontation doesn't necessarily mean like shouting or being like, I'm right and you're wrong. It
Right.
just means that you position things in a different way to be like, I hear you. I interpreted it as this, or I have a different opinion on this. Can I share? Right? And I think it's so much easier said than done because
Right.
anytime I have a disagreement with my parents, I'm always like, can I just share like one thing I have to say? But like it gets easier. It definitely gets easier. And I spoke about this previously. Like in school, I would like email my mum and dad because like I couldn't have the conversation with them in person, so I would like email them or like text them.
Right.
And then I just got to the point where I was like, why am I emailing my parents? We live in the same house, right? And so, it really does take small steps. And I think it's so amazing you've done this with your family now. And, I think, like you said, if you hadn't gone through that experience, you would have never have launched Ketish. So I think it's so powerful. And I love that you're sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you
But,
so much.
tell me some of like your hardest moments as an entrepreneur, starting this brand from scratch. It's crazy actually that you mentioned you started this like 2.5 years ago, because I often think with brands, and I'm oblivious to this too, is that you think things just happen, right? Like you'll see a
Yeah.
brand and you like be like now you told me it's 2.5 years. I'm like, oh my God, you've been working with this for 2.5 years. Like I just heard of you. So like,
Yeah.
why haven't I heard of you before? Do you know what I mean? I'm like, wow, it takes so much time. What have you experienced in those 2.5 years as like your highs and your lows?
Yeah. I would say that the toughest part is just continuously believing in yourself, just the resiliency in picking yourself up and dusting yourself off and continuing to go. Um, Whenever you're building anything from the ground up, there's going to be disappointments and setbacks and tough moments and things that fall through, and you have to have the ability to literally pull yourself up off the ground and keep going, and not really depend on someone else to do that for you. It's great. I have such a huge support network, so I'm lucky to have that, but there are such intimate moments as a founder where you're crying on your bathroom floor because something went incredibly wrong, and you can't necessarily always share that with everyone, and you have to have the strength to remember why you're doing this, what is the purpose that is driving you, and to continue going. I also think, starting a brand during a global pandemic is really hard. It's really hard. We were actually supposed to launch last year in 2020,
Okay.
and things blew up tremendously. I also think that it was COVID and a pandemic was a blessing in disguise. It allowed us to pause, take a step back, really think deeply into, what it is we wanted to stand for and who it is that we wanted to talk to and how we were going to do that. And I think if we didn't have the pandemic, we never would have had that opportunity. Sometimes you're just on a rat race. You just want to go. And so I think having the opportunity being forced to stop and slow down, although it was super, super frustrating at the time, now I realize it was one of our biggest blessings.
So tell me about Ketish. Tell me about the products you've launched, where we can find them, and I guess how to use them.
Yeah, so when it comes to products, the core mission behind the brand is to really remove this shame and the stigma that largely still exists around feminine wellness and intimate wellness products, but also the conversation as a whole. With our products specifically, the way we want to do this is we want to elevate the experience of buying intimate and feminine care products. So right now, a lot of the products that largely exist, especially here in the Middle East, it's changing in other markets, but a lot of the products that exist, they exist in the drugstore or the pharmacy. And, you go to the drugstore and the pharmacy when you're sick or when you're not feeling well, and we want to take that experience and we want to elevate it. So we want to give luxurious product that is effective, it's natural, it's safe, products that women can trust, and that they know that they know it's going to work for them, but also products that are bold and empowering, products that she could put on her vanity and feel excited to use, not like the products that have existed for years and years and years that are still in the pharmacy and we're unsure about. So that was like our core driver in terms of how we wanted to create products. When it comes to our first product, we just launched about a month ago. It is called the Quickie, and it is a pre-play intimate sheet. So it's an intimate wipe that is specifically formulated to be used on the intimate areas, but also can be used all over the body.
Okay.
We wanted to start off rather simple with one product, a product that was not really intimidating, something that can be used by women or men, but mostly women everywhere. And I think the reason why we wanted to start with a Quickie was to really open up this conversation. There's still a lot of shame and embarrassment or taboo around feminine care products. So like you had said earlier, when we're on our period, we whisper like to our girlfriend, oh, do you have a tampon? Or if our intimate sheet falls out of our purse, we get super embarrassed, and maybe we're not always confident about the way that our body smells after a long day. And we wanted to create products that work to remove that shame and that taboo and give women something that was super effective, luxurious, amazing to look at, something that she felt powerful carrying in her purse.
So one thing I find really amazing is how you started this brand when you're coming from a traditional family, you're living in the UAE. Have people actually said anything negative to you about starting this brand, or are people like shocked that you're doing it? What's the kind of feedback you're getting from actually building it up?
Yeah. I mean, we knew when we were starting a brand like this that it was a taboo brand, a taboo topic that we were looking to really face head on. Especially coming out of the Middle East, we knew we were going to have to be, I don't want to say careful, but mindful. We were going to have to be mindful and understand, you know, from every perspective, every type of woman, every mindset before we launched. And so we really took the time to talk to our community, to talk to women from all over the world, to understand how a brand like this could be received. And although some women came back to us and said, "Oh, this could be touchy," I think what really was consistent across the board with every woman we talked to, whether she was from Dubai, Saudi Arabia, the US, France, it didn't matter. Every single woman told us a brand like this is so needed, it's so important, like the time is now. And I think that reaffirmed everything. We definitely have been met with some criticism and some opposition, which is to be expected. And honestly, it's welcomed. I think that the biggest goal that we've had is to open up the conversation and to get people talking. And so whether it's something negative or something positive, it's a way for us to educate and a way for us to have the conversation, which is honestly one of our first goals. And so, we've been met with the opposition, but I think it's been a chance for us to have that healthy conversation that we anticipated anyways.
That's so true, actually. I never thought of it like that. It's actually a great thing if people don't understand it, because that's your mission, right? That's what you're trying to achieve, is for people to understand the need for this and the importance of it. And, you know, to be honest, I feel like I didn't know that I needed Ketish in my life.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, should I go and see a gynecologist? Like, have I been doing this wrong the whole time? You know, I think it's really going to open up a lot of questions for people who are listening and watching this, and it's really an amazing brand, and I just can't wait to see the new products you have that are going to be up and coming. But before we go, and before we wrap up, what's your biggest piece of advice to girls, or to anyone actually who's starting out on their journey, who's doing something a little bit different, and who actually is just doing it completely by themselves, just like you did?
I would say the biggest piece of advice I have is to really take the time to understand your why, and to really go deep into it, because there's going to be moments that things throw you off course, that make you doubt yourself, that make you doubt your ideas and your concept, and people might doubt you. And if you understand what the purpose is, you can go to bat for it every single time. And I think just being confident in that and understanding what that is, and really knowing why there's a gap in what it is that you're trying to do, there's no way anyone can shake you. And I think that's the biggest derailer that people meet, is that they get shaken off course because they don't have their feet firmly planted into the ground. And I think that a way to do that is just knowing and understanding your purpose.
I love that. It's so powerful. I mean, I just feel you're super, super, super brave. You have such an amazing energy about you.
Thank you.
And hopefully when I come to Dubai, I can meet you.
I love that.
and I can grab some Ketish products. Are they available in the UK?
So we ship globally off getketish.com. We also ship from HUDABeauty.com as well. We're also available in Europe on Sephora as well, and they ship within Europe and the EU. So if anyone's out there in Europe, they can purchase from Sephora.
Well, I really can't wait to use them, and I'm just so, so, so grateful you've come on this podcast.
We're going to send you some product, don't you worry, you'll get some.
I can't wait to see you blow up, because I just feel that, like, I'm so lucky I've spoken to you now, because in, like, a year's time, this is going to be, like, a very momentous time that I got to speak to you. So
thank you.
I'm really, really, really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you, and thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.